Shalom. I'm Rabbi Nathan Davidovich, speaking to you on behalf of the webyeshiva.org, speaking to you from Efrat, Israel. This week, we have two different Torah readings. We have Parsha Bahar and Parsha Bechukosai. Parsha Bechukosai finishes up the entire book of Vayikra, the book of Leviticus. I'm going to talk about the very first sentence of this Parsha Bechukosai and explain what relevance this has as to how we are living as Jews and trying to reach higher and higher spiritual levels every day. The sentence reads, Bechukotai telechu. If you will walk in my statutes, ves mitzvosai tishmeru, and you will observe my commandments, vasisimosam, and do them. And then it goes on and talks about the reward you get for doing commandments and the punishment for not. But we're going to stick to that first sentence. First of all, there's two important concepts. We have the word chukosai, which comes from the word chok, statute. What is a statute? A statute is something where we don't know why God is commanding it, and we have to fulfill the command simply because it's the will of God. And then the next thing is mitzvosai, your commandments. So it says you have to walk with the statutes and keep the commandments. The wonderful commentary of Rabbi Chaim Attar, the Ohr Hachaim, he gave 42 different interpretations on this one sentence, the first sentence of the Parsha Bechukosai. And he did these 42 to serve sort of as a guidebook. Each one was a foundational principle as to how a Jew should walk in Torah. It was meant to guide our spiritual and ethical conduct. And the 42 isn't a random number. He says each step requires and represents a core requirement in the Jew's walk to get closer to God. And one of the reasons given for the 42 interpretations is they represent the 42 journeys that the children of Israel took from Egypt to entering the Holy Land of Israel. And commentaries say that each of us go through 42 different journeys or tests in our lives. We know now that we are in the period called Sfirat Omer, the period between Pesach and Shavuot, the period where we leave the exile and we're going towards the highest level that we can reach, that we have reached as a Jewish people, the receiving of the Torah. And we count Sphira. We count 49 days from the time we left Egypt and until Shavuot, when the Torah is given. Now, when we begin counting, we do so, and it's called Sfirat Omer because Omer is a measurement. And when we begin counting, we bring an omer of barley as a sacrifice to God. When we reach Shavuot, of receiving the Torah, we bring 2 loaves of wheat bread. And the difference, of course, is that barley is something that is fed, it's like bran, fed to animals. Wheat is eaten by humankind. And we're having this transition from an animalistic kind of behavior to the highest spiritual behavior. So the Ohr Hachaim comments on this in his 23rd interpretation, and he says, this comment of Im Bechukotai Telechun is connected to a comment that the Holy Zohar made, where he says, Shor o kesef o eiz ki yivoli, when an ox or sheep is born. And he points out that the essential difference between man and beast is that once a beast, always a beast. Man, on the other hand, can refine himself into something superior than what he was at birth. And the deeds, he says, of man are the key to the spiritual elevation. He goes another explanation, the 29th explanation. He explains the words saying that we have to look at nature and observe the laws of nature. We observe that the sun, the moon, the stars are all performing God's orders, never deviating from their orbits. And when the Torah says, if you walk in my statute, the lesson the Torah teaches is that, like the planets, we should approach God's statute with an attitude similar to planets which don't look for any reward. They do what God commanded. If we approach Torah in that same way, we'll succeed in observing both the negative and positive commandments. And we should receive inspiration from the planets who obey God's commands without receiving a reward or facing penalties for non-compliance. He gives a 30th explanation. And he quotes the sentence in Pirkei Avot, the Ethics of the Father, Ein Kemach, Ein Torah. Ein Torah, Ein Kemach. He says, if there's no prosperity, you have no income, you can't have Torah. Torah is not going to grow. And when there is no Torah, your income is not going to grow. And he says this means when you have no flour, when you have no prosperity, means when you observe God's blessings, you can see that God grants you blessings through the Torah. And when in Parsha Hazinu, Moshe said, Yarav kamatra likhi, let my doctrine drop as the rain, just as rain is caused by God alone, in accordance with the wishes he wants to supply us with, so too our economic prosperity is due to our absorbing and living in accordance with God's doctrine. And if you lack economic prosperity, you can attribute this to the fact that the Torah is not being studied and observed by the multitude. So he points out the causal relationship between the study of Torah and prosperity. And it's a reminder that if we want to study, if we want to have prosperity, we want to have an income, we want to succeed, we have to be in constant performance, walking in God's statutes and performing his commandments. The 33rd way of explaining this has to do with people who try to do a mitzvah and they try to evaluate what is the significance. If they don't understand the significance of it, then I think it's not important. He's telling us that your thoughts about the sincerity of praying to God, of doing a mitzvah, is what's important. And I'm going to close with the 38th one, which relates to chesed. Chesed, doing kindness for somebody else, is one of the most important things that one Jew could do to another, one human being could do to another. And he points out, he gives a story that is referenced in Masechet Shabbos. Two scholars, Shmuel and a Gentile scholar, Avlet, were sitting together and they were watching people walk by towards a lake. And Avlet pointed to a certain man in that group, and he said that individual would not reach the lake alive. A snake would bite him and he would die. And Shmuel replied that if that person was a Jew, he would reach the destination alive. It so happened that the person did reach the lake alive. And when the man came back and passed these two scholars, they stopped him. And Avlet examined his backpack and found a snake in the backpack which had been crushed to death. Shmuel asked the man to find out what merit he had that had saved him from imminent death. The man told him that the group he belonged to usually eat lunch together. Each one would unpack his lunchbox, take it out of his rucksack, and throw the contents into a common pool so everybody could eat. And on that day, one of them had not brought any food, and he was embarrassed. So the person who had the snake in his backpack pretended to take bread from the backpack of the person who had no food, didn't bring any food, and threw his own food into the common pool to save his friend from embarrassment. Shmuel complimented him on the noble deed. And the story indicates that although, according to whatever influences Avlet was using to determine that this man should have died, says the Jew is not guided by these horoscopic influences. He says the words in this sentence provide the condition that we can free ourselves from unfavorable influences. And the laws, the statutes, the chukim, do not operate. The laws of chukim prevent any of the astrological forces from having an effect on you. Mitzvosai tishmoru, walk in my statutes and keep my mitzvos. That's what God requires. There's many more, obviously, but there's no time to talk about it. The Ohr Hachaim was unbelievable in writing these 42 different comments. Thank you for listening on behalf of the web yeshiva.org. I wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom.